It's time to make your voice heard. It's time to vote. Wisconsin's 2018 general election is Tuesday, November 6th. We're going to go over a couple tips and reminders just to make that voting process a little easier for folks. If it's your first time voting, there are just a lot of things to know and a couple rules that need to be followed. If you voted before, this will be a quick refresher for you. First of all, voters must be registered to vote, but you can register right at the polls. Wisconsin is very unique where you can register on Election Day right when you show up at your polling place. You can register at the polls on Election Day and have a couple things with you, so be prepared. When you go to register, you have to prove your address. First of all, the poll worker is going to make sure you're at the right polling place. And we're going to share a resource for how you can find your polling place in a moment. But if you're in a new district and you want to make sure you're at the right spot, you're going to share your address. You're then going to prove your address to make sure that you aren't able to vote at multiple polling places. So this is a little fail-safe to make sure that you vote once and you vote at the right spot. So you will have to prove your address when you vote. You're also going to need to prove your identity, not to register to vote itself. So you're going to have two forms of ID that you need handy on Election Day. Let's talk about proof of address first for registering, and then talk about proof of identity for voting second. So when you are registering to vote, you will need something that proves your current address, and that could be something like a utility bill. Bring a piece of mail with you, like a utility bill, a copy of your lease or mortgage, a bank statement, or other official document that has your name on it and your current address. That is enough to prove identity. Let's say you don't have a paper copy of a bank statement. What if you only have it on your phone? That's fine. You can show the poll worker an electronic copy on your phone, on a tablet, or go ahead and bring in that paper if you have it accessible. That is all you need to prove address, your name and your current address as shown on an important document. Now you've been registered, they walk you in and they say now you're going to need to check in with the poll worker and we're going to need to see proof of photo ID so that you can actually fill out a ballot. Now this is different than proving address. This is proving identity. So not just any ID will do. There is a list of accessible forms of identification. We just give a sampling here, but when we share some resources at the end, we're going to give you some links to where you can see all of the appropriate forms of identification. The most common one that people use when they vote is a driver's license or a U.S. passport. Those are just showing you are who you say you are, as vouched by another government agency. So driver's license, if you're in the military, any form of military or veteran ID, your U.S. passport, some student IDs if you're a student and you're voting, but not all student IDs. So check with your student services office at your college or university to make sure that is something that has been approved. And colleges are very aware of what is acceptable and what is not. On our extensive list of identifications, we also give you a little bit more detail on that. Now, let's say you are somebody that just does not have a current photo ID. You can get one for free at your local DMV, your Department of Motor Vehicles in Wisconsin. If you bring some supporting documents, will give you a temporary ID that can be used for voting. So make sure you carve out a little time to go to the DMV and get your free ID if you don't have one. Wisconsin's voter ID requirement is still relatively new. We used to not do this in Wisconsin, but now we do. And there were a lot of complaints about people that said, I just don't have access to a photo ID. So Wisconsin has now implemented this procedure to get a free ID at the Department of Motor Vehicles, but you do have to bring some other form of proof. Most common form of proof is a birth certificate. If you don't have access to that, bring what you have. The DMV will look at what you have and they'll determine if that's sufficient to give you a temporary identification. Now, one of the links that we have is myvote.wisconsin.gov. That goes into a lot of detail on this photo ID requirement. We're going to share that link with you again at the end of this presentation. But keep myvote.wisconsin.gov handy as a resource for Election Day policies, where to find your polling place, and most specifically, if you do have questions about photo ID. Now, photo ID details. The address on your ID, your photo ID, like your driver's license, doesn't have to match where you currently live. That's because it is not being used to prove address, it is being used to prove identity. So your address on your driver's license can be wrong. It can be your old house or your old apartment. as long as the driver's license itself is still valid within the last 2 years. It can even be expired since the last general election, and you can still use it. The date we're looking at for the cutoff for expiration is November 8th, 2016. If your driver's license has since expired since that date, you can still use it. So the address can be incorrect on that driver's license, and it can be recently expired, and you still have the right to use that to prove identity. So there will be a couple questions from folks as you go to the polling place. Please engage the poll worker. There is an elections official at every poll. If you have questions, make sure you ask them and to say, is this valid? Is this okay if I use this? And have a conversation with the poll worker. They will let you know based on their instructions if they think that's appropriate. Now, there are a couple ideas of where to vote. We said we would share this link with you again. Your voting location is really based on where you live. You're divided into wards. Search for your polling place at that myvote.wisconsin.gov website. There is a specific link that says Find My Polling Place. You'll click right on that button. You'll enter your name and address, and it's going to tell you what your local polling place is. Polls are open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Election Day. 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. If you are in line at 8 p.m., if there is a line for some reason and you are in it, you have the right to vote if you were in line at 8 p.m. So that is just your window of opportunity to vote, to cast your vote, and keep in mind your rights. If you are in line and the polling place otherwise has closed, you still get to cast your vote. Now, let's say you cannot make it to a polling place. Now, for folks that knew this in advance, there is the opportunity to vote absentee. Anybody can vote absentee. You don't need an excuse to get a ballot sent to you or to vote ahead of time. You can just do it in Wisconsin. Everybody has the right to absentee vote. You need to request an absentee ballot if you want one sent to you. When you request it, you have to meet that photo ID requirement. So some people will send in a copy of a driver's license, for example, if you are doing this by mail. There is the opportunity to request an absentee ballot online, by fax, by email. So check with your municipal clerk, and they will give you instructions and timelines for that. If you want to vote absentee in person just ahead of Election Day, which is allowed in Wisconsin, you can also check with your municipal clerk, and they will give you instructions on where you can vote. And there will be a list of all the places in your community that has voting open. It sometimes will be right at the clerk's office, sometimes it's at a public library, but they will tell you acceptable places to vote early if you want to cast your ballot early. This is great for people that know they'll be out of town on Election Day and want to make sure they can still vote if you did not request a paper ballot, but it's also just a great opportunity for people that maybe want a little bit more time or accessibility or are afraid of lines. You can vote early, and make sure you check with your municipal clerk about what your options are there. Now, what is on the ballot? This is the 2018 general election here in Wisconsin. We are voting for governor and lieutenant governor, attorney general, secretary of state, state treasurer, U.S. senator, representatives for Congress, state senators in odd-numbered districts, and then representatives to the assembly in all districts. And in certain local elections, there might be things like sheriffs or clerks of court or other local elections that might be important. You can read all of this. That link again is myvote.wisconsin.gov, and the Wisconsin is just WI, so myvote.wi.gov. That's going to give you the opportunity to find your polling place, see a sample ballot, check to see if you are registered. There's a lot of information there. We also give you the website for the Wisconsin Elections Commission that goes into a lot more detail on the candidates. We share some really great resources from the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin. Their website is very comprehensive. It goes into detail on some of those voter ID requirements as well. And the League of Women Voters of Dane County has also provided candidate answers, including some of those statewide offices. So questions posed to the candidates, and whoever sent back a reply, that reply gets published. And you can read how some of these candidates have answered questions important to the people of Wisconsin. If you have questions about voting or how to find your municipal clerk, or how to access the polls, you can always send us a question and we can get back to you. And we're at healthwatchwisconsin.org.